and welcome to a brand new episode of Beyond the Indus. I'm your host, Tushar Shetty. Revolution is hard. History is littered with the wreckage of young people united in their dream of overthrowing repression, only to watch their movements collapse into chaos or birth new forms of tyranny. From the Russian Revolution of 1917, that gave way to a brutal civil war and Stalin's horrific atrocities, to Iran's 1979 revolution that replaced the Shah with an equally authoritarian theocracy. This pattern repeats itself across centuries. Even in the 21st century, we witness the Arab Spring's initial promise dissolve into civil wars, military coups, and deeper instability across the region, which is what makes the events of July and August last year in Bangladesh so much more interesting. What began as student protests over government job reservations, a seemingly routine grievance that might have been contained with your typical political maneuvering, was spectacularly mishandled by Sheikh Hasina's Awami League government, who responded with violence and repression. What followed was nothing short of extraordinary, a student-led mass uprising that culminated in the deposition of Sheikh Hasina, who had ruled Bangladesh for over 15 years with an iron fist, on August the 5th, 2024. Now, instead of descending into the political power struggles and bloodshed that have marked so many transitions, the various factions came together around a singular choice, Dr. Muhammad Yunus, the country's most respected economist and a Nobel Peace Prize winner, who would serve as interim chief advisor to restore stability and guide the nation towards democratic elections. But if revolutions are hard, the part after can be even harder. In the years since Sheikh Hasina's ouster, the embattled Dr. Yunus has had to manage various factions, demanding that he hold elections as soon as possible, while trying to maintain stability and order and deliver justice to the victims of the previous regime. The political void that's left by the formerly dominant Awami League is being fought over by the various parties who are all staking a claim on forming the government when elections happen next year. And the fragile peace is being threatened with occasional bouts of mob violence, and all this is taking place at a time when the global economy and international relations are in flux. So how is Bangladesh navigating this difficult path towards liberal democracy? That is the subject of this month's episode, where our panel of three formidable Bangladesh experts, Dr. Smruti Pattanaik, Mubashar Hasan, and Jyoti Rahman, will help us understand the state of Bangladesh on the one-year anniversary of the Monsoon Revolution, and chart the progress and roadblocks on Bangladesh's road to normalcy and the restoration of its democracy. Stay tuned. So joining us today on our panel, we have three fantastic guests to talk about the politics of Bangladesh and its democratic transition in the years since the Monsoon Revolution. Starting with Dr. Mubashar Hasan is adjunct researcher, Humanitarian and Development Research Initiative, HADRI, at Western Sydney University, Australia, and holds a PhD in politics from Griffith University. He's the author of the book Islam and Politics, The Followers of Ummah, and the co-editor of the book Masks of Authoritarianism, Hegemony, Power, and Public Life in Bangladesh. Mubashar, welcome back to Beyond the Indus.
Thank you for inviting me, Tushar.
Next, we have Dr. Smruti S. Pattanaik, who is a research fellow at the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis. She holds a PhD in South Asian Studies from the School of International Studies, JNU, and specializes on politics in South Asia and India's policy towards its neighbors. Smruti, great to have you on again.
Thank you so much, Tushar, for having me.
And last but not least, we have Jyoti Rahman, who is an Australia-based macroeconomist and a keen observer and analyst of the Bangladesh economy. We recently had Jyoti on to discuss the tariff impacts on Bangladesh, so it's wonderful to have him joining us for this panel. Jyoti, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tushar, for having me.
Fantastic. So to begin with, it's August 5th today as we're recording, exactly 1 year after the ouster of Sheikh Hasina. And in the years since, we now know a lot more about the events that led to the ouster of Sheikh Hasina and her government last year on this day. So in light of new evidence that has come out, how would you evaluate the findings and evidence from the various commissions and investigations into the events that took place? And what have they revealed about the role of state forces, the scale of the casualties, and the broader institutional failures that precipitated the uprising? Can we lay the blame squarely on Sheikh Hasina for the fall of her government?
So I think the question, the the findings of different commissioners, especially the UN fact-finding mission, confirms Sheikh Hasina's complicity in directing indiscriminate killing of the Bangladeshi civilians. And recently there was a news documentary released by BBC where they verified Sheikh Hasina's voice, and we heard that she was directing to deploy helicopters and shooting citizens who were protesting against her. So, to answer your question in one sentence, yes, the blame squarely goes to Sheikh Hasina. She became so authoritarian and, in a way, lost her mind at and total and shown total disrespect to the international law, that she just thought she will cling into power, she will kill through and through just to hang into power. And we haven't seen in our lifetime, and I'm referring from early late 80s up to now, such a brutal regime in Bangladesh. And most of all, it was women who were a symbol of women empowerment to the West, by ruling a Muslim majority country, who turned out to a blood-sucking dictator. So I think what is needed most importantly, that she should have faced the courts for the alleged crimes she committed. But unfortunately, on this day, which marks the 1 year after her fall, we still are far away from justice.
Mhm. And I do wonder about when I ask about the blame, let's say, I do want to also ask about what we know about the institutional failures or if there's any new evidence that's come out. And I also want to ask about, I believe, this recording of Sheikh Hasina voice that came out in the Daily Star as part of the investigations. And have you verified the authenticity of that recording? And do we know for certain that she's directing her either party members or the forces to use force on the protesters in that recording?
Yeah, so I will answer the second question first. It was also broadcasted by BBC World Service. And BBC is a highly professional organization which will make sure that will verify the credibility of this audio, and then they will broadcast to it, because they're a public broadcaster funded by the British taxpayer, right? And since they broadcasted it, after their broadcast, Daily Star published the new evidence, and they also looked into the metadata and so forth. And both news outlet confirmed that it was Sheikh Hasina's command voice and command. And look, Tushar, I think we also need to acknowledge that she politicized the intelligence agencies in Bangladesh, which include the military intelligence, DGFI, NSI, police, Rapid Action Battalion, and a bureaucracy, judiciary, to cling into the power. So that and they also served her. Many of the officials were more more interested to serve her for material benefits, as we have seen in the news that MPs under Sheikh Hasina had owned 600 properties worldwide, including 300 in Britain. You live in Berlin, and you know how hard for um, hard for ordinary citizen to own one flat or even one house, whereas a Bangladeshi MP under Sheikh Hasina's government owns 600, including 300 in UK. So I come back to your question about the institutional failure. Yes, there was this institutional failure, but it was also politically motivated and politically directed. And now, after 1 year, we still are seeing that many of the officials who were engaged in enforced disappearance, extrajudicial killing, they are still in service. And that is an utter disrespect to the victims and survivors. And I think there is institutional, the security apparatus in Bangladesh remain outside of the reform agenda for some reason. And without the reforming Bangladeshi security sectors, including the intelligence agencies, I do not think Bangladesh will see a meaningful and fruitful democratic future.
If I can add to what Mubashar was saying, I completely agree with what he was saying regarding the voice. The quality of the voice, whether it was her or not, I would not get into that detail. But I would say, since she was the prime minister, in a parliamentary system, the prime minister is supreme, and all of us we know what was Hasina's position in the power structure. So obviously, without her order, such kind of killing would not have happened. As also previously I had mentioned that there is a coalition of interest which Mubashir is speaking, and he is also saying that that particular coalition of interest is not gone. It seems to have broken now because the army broke away from that coalition of interest when the government fell. So the bureaucracy, some of the people who have been involved during her regime in implementing some of her decisions are still in power. So to be very frank, the manner in which bureaucracy functions in South Asia, I'm not really sure whether the stranglehold of this interest has been completely dismantled for any kind of reform to take place. And I completely agree with Mubashar that security sector reform is extremely significant for any kind of reform of the political process, because police is the instrument of any government that comes to power in Bangladesh, or for that matter in any other country. But the thing is that there will be significant resistance from the security forces. I have not seen anybody arrested, very few, but most of the people who have been who acted hand in gloves with the regime of the past have not been arrested.
Smruti, how would you assess, as we're coming up to, let's say, 1 year of Dr. Yunus's administration, and we just have come off a speech that he's given, how would you assess the performance of Dr. Yunus's interim administration over the past year? And what are some of the challenges that his government has faced in managing this democratic transition? I've also heard that he's been accused of attempting to delay elections without a clear timeline. I'm not sure if this resolved or not, but what might some of the reasons be that he's been pushing these elections and has not called elections earlier?
I would like to say that there was a lot of expectation after the fall of Hasina. In fact, you could see various demonstrations took place. Some for salary increase, some for promotion, which they have been denied on political grounds, and also obviously came with a lot of expectation from the people that he's the miracle who will in fact usher in an era where everything will change in Bangladesh. So obviously, that is something impossible kind of expectation. But having said that, very quickly on the issues of managing, to me, it appeared some of the time, some of the members of the government speaking out of turn. It appeared to me sometime as if there is no unity. If Professor Inus is saying something, then the advisors are saying something. So there was multiple voice, which actually should not have been the case. For any kind of person who is going to the public and making any kind of, that need to be a kind of discussion. You can't speak on multiple voices, because you are leading a government where you have the burden of real expectations, quite a bit of expectation, mountain of expectations, I would say. Having said that, the challenges were first, I would say, is the law and order situation. Law and order situation, not because of what he could have done, because the police force they had run away. So to manage day-to-day affairs, some of the places the military was there. So he has that challenges of maintaining the law and order, the lawlessness where this unsocial element try to take advantage of the situation, be getting engaged in looting and all that kind of thing. That was the first challenge. Second challenge is the challenge of reforms, not just having commissions for various reforms, but also having a kind of consensus over the reforms. And we also have seen how even for the July declaration, which today he was reading out, there was no consensus. And when I was listening to him, I was thinking that many of the things he did not mention. He particularly deleted the BNP period there has been movement. It is not that there has not been movement. There has not been any kind of other things. But I saw, the 9 years of student and people's struggle against military dictatorship was directed against Asia. So it to me it read like very very just very focused on Army League, not very much forward looking kind of thing. As far as the election is concerned, see, there is a jostling of interest. The BNP wants the election to happen first and with minimal reform. The Jamaat wants the reforms first, complete reforms, and then then the election. The students want a new constitution to be rewritten by a constituent assembly. It is not, they have not said it very clearly whether it is elected or unelected, constituent assembly. That is not clear. So I think he faces multiple challenges, not an easy task for him. But the election will be very, very significant because that actually will signal the power transition from this regime to that another regime, and also the sustainability of the reforms. Because this is not the first time Bangladesh is undergoing the reforms. We have seen in 2007 and 8 and all the reforms vanished. So obviously some people are arguing that no, that it is taking time because they don't want the reforms to go just to go away like it happened in the past. But the thing is that what is the kind of constitutional mechanism will be there that will not allow touching of, these reforms. If it goes against the party which comes to power after the election, what happens then? Can't the party, being an elected representative, change some of the reforms? Because they embody the as we said, the mandate. I'm not saying that this government really embodies a kind of aspiration, but in democracy terms, we always tend to look at election, and I do understand the transition took place in such a time there is no way you can really assess the mandate. The immediate thing was just to transit to a multi-party democracy as soon as possible with consensus reform so that it does not fall out after the election happens.
Just to echo what Smruti said, but also add a few other things. So one thing that we could think about is what are what I like to characterize this as the paradox of Professor Yunus, which is this. Exactly 12 months ago, last August 2024, when Hasina had fled, Professor Yunus was probably the only individual who commanded respect across the political, all anti-Hasina political spectrum, and was physically able to lead the country. Mrs. Zia, Khaleda Zia of BNP, was also respected, but she is extremely ill and in fact was in jail at that. So Professor Yunus was the only person who had the political support across the board, and also the single most qualified person to project Bangladesh and Bangladesh's political change internationally. So that's one side. On the other hand, and this is the paradox, on the other hand, he was probably the single most unsuitable person to lead a major reform process, a significant transition such as this. And that is because he does not, and this could sound controversial, but he does not have any political platform or political vision or political agenda of his own. Okay, so there is nothing in the reform process that he could say that, okay, this is Professor Yunus's vision for the political future of the country. And because he does not have that, he provided, there was a vacuum that he has presided over. And what we have seen in terms of things that Smruti was talking about in terms of different advisors speaking out of turn, or other things that we may talk about later, such as religious politics or law and order challenges and all of those things. Those things were compounded precisely because Professor Yunus did not have any of his own reform agenda as such. everyone thought that this is an opportunity to uh, push for push for their platform, their ideas. And obviously, once the election is called and election is had, somebody is going to win, others are not going to win, and that would dictate who gets to actually imprint their vision on the country. Right now, if you think that you are not going to win an election, which is actually the case for most parties, then you have an incentive to delay the election as much as possible, because in the interim you could say whatever those ideas are. It's not just the Islamists or left or right or anything. It's across the board. Whatever ideas people may have, this interim period is good for you if you think that you are not going to win an election and form a government, and that has compounded the problem.
Right. And I think that's interesting because we are coming up to the elections, which are, I believe, expected in early to mid 2026. Do you have any update on that or confirmation on the exact date?
The in the speech, Professor Yunus had not actually announced a date. He did, however, refer to um, so as Shruti said, that there are differences of opinion on whether it should be a new constitution versus just simply amending the old constitution. It seems to me that he has made it very clear that it would be um, the reforms that had been agreed upon will be the existing constitution will be amended to incorporate the reform. That's how I understood what he said. He has not in the speech. He did not give a specific date, but there's wide speculation in Dhaka that a date is forthcoming soon.
Right. And with the elections coming up soon, hopefully, I do wonder what your assessment of Bangladesh's current political environment is, because we've seen a change in the political environment, obviously, with the fall of the Awami League and the associated parties as well. But we've also seen a balance of power shift among the major political players since the fall of Sheikh Hasina's government. Could you talk about the shift in the political landscape and the balance of power? And what are the prospects you think for the BNP, who I believe are favored to lead the next government? Maybe starting with Jyoti.
Thanks again, Tushar. Yes, the after the fall of Awami League, there is a reshuffling of the political board. Um, Before I get into detail, one thing to note is that Bangladesh has not had any credible election, not just at the national level, but also at the local level since 2013. So that's about 12 years. Last parliamentary election that is considered somewhat credible was in 2008. Sort of there is a lot of known unknowns in that. Up to a quarter of voters have never voted in any election. Therefore, we don't really know which way they might go. Having said that, there are opinion polls, and they suggest that yes, BNP is likely to win any parliamentary election, even though their support is not as strong as one might think. Just to put them in just to quantify that a little bit. Traditionally, BNP's support had been about between 30 and 40% of voters, and if you win 40% of the votes in a first past the post Westminster type election system, with 40% of votes, you can easily win a very comfortable majority, and that's probably what BNP is looking at. That it could win something like between 35 to 40% of the votes and get a very comfortable electoral majority. Uh, the I know that we'd probably talk about Jamaat Islami and religious politics later, but one thing the polls make it very clear is that these parties, particularly Jamaat, has significantly increased its support. Whether that increase in support in the polls actually translate into actual votes, and whether that translated into votes actually translate into seats in the parliament remains to be seen. Um, Historically, Jamaat had been geographically very concentrated. So if that pattern holds, then they could double or triple their votes, but does not necessarily mean that that seat count is going to get anywhere near majority. On the other hand, if they have broken out of their geographic concentration, then that could be a very different thing. The wild card is probably the Awami League supporters. Uh, Historically, even back in the 70s, when Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and other Awami League leaders were killed or jailed in military coups and so on, even then, and this is after after Sheikh Mujib had himself lost popularity massively because of the famine and one party rule and all of those things. So even back then, Awami League had won something like 24% of votes. This is during Ziaur Rahman's time, when Zia was a very popular president and Awami League was very unpopular. Even then, they managed to win about 24%. So that's their historic low at that time. If the numbers are anywhere near that, then that is sort of that's a large chunk of population that may still be supporting Awami League. We simply do not know, because we don't have any ground level data. And polls are not very useful in this context, because, as you might imagine, if you are an Awami League supporter, but in the current political climate, you might be too shy to talk about this. It's kind of like, sort of in the West, you might be voting Trump, but you might not actually want to admit it to the pollster, or you might be voting Brexit, but you might not want to admit it, and therefore, those things came as a surprise to political analysts. There might be something like that. So we do not know, and that is a wild card. Of course, Awami League is not technically, they're not banned, but their activities have been suspended. So it's a legal limbo. It's not clear whether they would actually be allowed to participate in the election, or even if they did not participate under their own banner or using their own electoral symbol, it's possible that in certain geographic areas where they're strong, individuals might run as independents. We have seen examples of like that in, say, for example, Pakistan, where Imran Khan's party was banned, but a lot of people went and voted for independents, who everyone knew were from Imran Khan's party. Now, again, I'm not by any means suggesting that Awami League is as popular as Imran Khan. Not at all. They are unpopular. In any fair election, they would lose. But the question is, how badly would they lose if they were allowed to run? If they're not allowed to run, then where would their supporters go?
Yeah, and I do want to come to the Awami League and also the new political forces like the NCP, who I believe are trying to gun for the Awami League vote. But before that, you did mention the Jamaat-e-Islami, and Smruti and Mubashar, the rehabilitation of parties like the Jamaat into mainstream politics does represent somewhat of a shift in Bangladesh's political landscape. I wonder what its implications are in terms of maybe the balance of secular versus religious politics in Bangladesh. Are there concerns about the future of the country's secular constitutional framework and social fabric if parties like Islamist parties like the Jamaat, and I believe the Shibir as well, which is a student wing, if these parties come into the mainstream? And do you think this could potentially lead to a rise in religious extremism?
If I can come in, I think the JI basically played a very significant role last year. But also at the same time, what I understand that they are not in a hurry to capture power, because the Jamaat philosophy has been to strengthen its network across the country, to build its vote bank. In one of my interviews with somebody close to Jamaat, told me that they're aspiring to get around 20% of vote. If they get that, they'll be really, really happy. But also at the same time, currently the BNP and Jamaat are not in a electoral kind of alliance. But I really do not know, because in political parties, you just can't predict and say that this cannot happen. Politics is the game of making impossible possible. Having said that, I think as Jyoti was speaking, it is about what actually will happen to Awami League, whether the government will allow it to participate in the election, because it is deregistered as a political party by the Election Commission of Bangladesh. And therefore, it appears to me there is no rethinking within the Army League to go into Imran Khan kind of mode of fielding independent candidate, because it's too centrally controlled party, and that is one of the reason of our downfall also. So I'm not very sure. So suppose, like, let us take hypothetically, because it's too early to say, Army League decides not to participate, or the government does not allow it to participate. So the struggle and the fight will be who is going to capture the Army League vote. If you ask me, it's a kind of, again, hypothesis. Mubashar will come to my rescue. I think it appears to me the fight probably now is to where does the vote goes. If the Army Leaguers, the support base going to vote in the next election. Obviously, they are going to vote. So my apprehension is that they will not vote for the NCP, because they primarily see NCP as responsible for the fall of Hasina. Number one. Number two, traditionally, the Army League has been opposed to the BNP, so I don't see their vote going to the BNP. To me, it appears that it can go to the Jamaat. It may appear very strange, secular, and this thing. That's a very different kind of debate. I don't want to enter into that debate. So to me, it appear, because why I'm saying this, because there is this current debate which is going on, narrative which is going on, whether those people, those Chhatra Shibir people who were part of the Army League and fought with the Army League against the students and the Chhatra Janata, so whether they should be tried tried in the crime committed against the students. There is a long debate which is going on. Mubashar knows it, Jyoti must be knowing it. So therefore, I would say that in many areas, especially in the rural areas, what I heard, I'm not, because Mubashar visited and stayed back for a longer time. I only was there for 4-5 days. To me, what I heard speaking to the people, that in many places in the rural areas, when the Army League supporters were targeted, it is the Jamaat which came to their rescue, Jamaat cadres. Because after all, Jamaat had taken shelter within the Army League cadres also. So perhaps, I'm not very sure, perhaps the vote may go to the Jamaat. Maybe some people will not vote. Maybe some people will vote probably for Jamaat because of the traditional hostility towards the BNP and the NCP, which is newly constituted and always has been involved in virulent anti-India kind of anti-Hasina, anti-Army League, because even also today's the July declaration was very much about the Army League. So in that context, I don't think any Army League supporter will vote them next election.
So I'll focus on the issue of the political landscape, and also the leadership crisis Sheikh Hasina is facing within the Army League, right? When we talk about Army League, we also need to understand that we're talking about a party where a group of people who are the elites have made a lot of money and fled the country, whereas a vast majority of the grassroots activists remain in Bangladesh, and many of them are living and hiding, and also facing social stigmatization. One of the core problem for Army League at this moment is the social stigma associated with the July-August massacre, and also the video footages of illegal secret prison. I was imprisoned in one of those for 44 days in 2017. I have seen in my own eyes how Sheikh Hasina and Army League's government disappeared people where their families are looking for their loved ones, and they just kidnap people and confined them in illegal secret prison where prisoners are not allowed to go under the sun. They were confined in in one of those cells where one people would live, or or many people were confined in one cell. It was a total disrespect for the dignity, and we need to understand the anger of the people who took the streets. And what we're talking about here is that people of all classes, including street beggars, street vendors, rich people, middle class, all took the streets against Sheikh Hasina. That mindset still runs within the society, and many are detrimental to the resurgence of Awami League. I have friends within that party. Not all of them have participated in the criminal activities, but they say that there are internal discussion going on about the legitimacy of the Sheikh Hasina, because what they have seen is that her family and family members, who all of them who are foreign citizens of another country, and all of them are rich, and that sort of things are becoming more and more visible within the party line. And I think we need to appreciate that, it is a natural process that people, when they stop getting the benefit, which is started from last year August 5, they would question the leader, and that is started to happening. So we're gonna see in the coming days, probably, that there will be challenge towards the leadership, but I think it's too early now. Many are still in hiding. That's number one. Number two is, even though Jamaat is not very significant in terms of voting, but they are very significant in terms of influencing the middle class politics. And journalists who are stationed in Dhaka, and my friends, they have told me that many leadership position within the bureaucratic organization and universities, top positions in the universities are now being run by the Jamaat people. So that is why one of the reasons they didn't support BNP's proposition for early election. And in a way, after the fall of Hasina, there has been a realignment within the political landscape in Bangladesh, whereas many commentators used to term BNP as center right. In my assessment, now BNP has shifted towards more center, because obviously there is a breakup between Jamaat and BNP, and it was quite evident and it was quite public. Whereas BNP is referring to 1971, the ideals of democracy. Jamaat is trying to come up with a bigger Islamist alliance. Your last question about whether giving space to Jamaat would encourage extremism, I think I do not have enough data, but I think what we are seeing is that there is a realignment of radical rights. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they would espouse to violence. What it means that we are going to see much more conservative part in the society being more vocal. I would also say that this resurgence of Jamaat is underpins two things about the party. One, they have endured lot of repression under Hasina, and Hasina played that counterterrorism card to extrajudicially kill Shibir activists, imprison Jamaat leaders. And we all know that through the International Crimes Tribunal, which hanged 5 Jamaat leaders, I think, if I'm not wrong, she made Jamaat quite leaderless, but it's still that party is thriving. And I wrote an article in the Diplomat magazine, I think last year, where I told that by interviewing Jamaati leaders that in fact their membership has thrived. But does it mean that they are acceptable widely in Bangladesh? I would doubt that, because if we look back to the July-August revolution or uprising or Monsoon uprising, we have seen the uprising started after Sheikh Hasina called the protester Rajakars. That means that the Rajakar is a very degradatory term, in Bangladesh's history and refer to the people who sided with the Pakistani military during the 1970 war in Bangladesh. So people revolted because they found the term Rajakar is dignitary, and many Jamaat leaders were allegedly Rajakars in 1971. So in a country where people revolted in protest of someone terming them Rajakars, I do not think Jamaat has many mileage to earn in future.
I do want to come to this interesting new political phenomenon that we've been seeing, and that's the emergence of new political entities like the NCP from the student movement. And also, I'd like to combine that with a question about the law and order situation that all three of you have made reference to. So I want to understand this NCP party, which is an emerged out of the student movement. And they're quite a contradiction, I find. They're very interesting. They advocate for things like liberal values, secularism, and reform. I believe in their first convocation meeting, they began it with quotes from the Quran, the Gita, and the Bible, if I'm not mistaken. And yet they, in opposing terms like fascism and Mujibism, is core of their political ideology as well. And they seem to express this opposition to fascism and Mujibism through a lot of street violence and extrajudicial justice. So I just like to ask two questions. One of them is, how would you evaluate the emergence of a force like the NCP and other student-linked parties in Bangladesh politics and the viability in the long run? You know, do you think they have the ability to form a government or penetrate into rural areas? And connected to that, I also want to ask your views on the sort of mob violence and vigilante justice that we've seen in the past year. I think most recently we had an incident in Gopalganj. To what extent do you think these two are connected? And what implications does that have for institutional stability in Bangladeshi politics in the future?
So everything you have said, Tushar, is very much valid in that the party NCP, they have tried to ride on the wave of the July uprising, and sort of that's their biggest political capital. The young leaders became celebrities overnight 12 months ago. That's one element. They have consciously tried to portray themselves as moderate or very much within the mainstream of Bangladeshi political milieu. They have talked, they've tried to be inclusive, or they have said that they are inclusive. This is all true. At the same time, the actual actions are, for all the talks of new politics, it's very much very similar to, sort of traditional politics of crowd mobilization or, sort of tapping into patronage network and their allegations of money flows and corruption, all of those things, right? And I don't mean that in a judgmental way. Yeah, this is probably how things are in the subcontinent or in the developing world, or indeed in the developed world. So perhaps it's not realistic to expect a new political party to be any different from the broader socio-political context. So that is one thing. The another thing that I would like to point out is that this is probably the only political party in the subcontinent that I can think of which is not centered around a key individual or a charismatic individual. As you know, in our part of the world, even communist parties or Islamist parties or sort of parties with strong ideological preferences end up with key centered around key individuals. So, for example, in West Bengal, the communists had been in power for several decades. And it was actually my namesake, Mr. Jyoti Basu, who was a domineering figure, right? In Bangladesh, Awami League has the Sheikh family, Mujib and Hasina. The BNP has the Zias, Ziaur Rahman, Khaleda Zia, and now probably Tariq Rahman, their son. Pakistan has the Bhuttos and Sharifs. and even Imran Khan, or indeed in India now Mr. Modi, right? So sort of that kind of strong, charismatic individual leading a party or a movement is something that we know, and NCP does not have any such individual who's sort of above and beyond everyone else. That is, on the one hand, that's very exciting because this is something new. But on the other hand, this is also, there's probably a reason why this doesn't happen in subcontinent. Um, and that is because our political, our socio-political landscape does not favor this kind of, collective leadership kind of approach. That makes things very difficult for them. I think that's probably where I would stop. I know that you also had asked about the Awami League ban and violence and all of that, but maybe Mubashar or Shruti, you guys could probably tackle that part of the question.
So I maybe I'll follow Jyoti, and then Shruti, you can join in if that is okay with you. So to answer your question, I think one of the reasons that it is so much less tolerant towards Mujibism or equating Mujibism with fascism, I think it is coming from fear, Tushar. The reason is, the key figures of the NCP leaders were actually not even arrested. They're picked up by Sheikh Hasina's government, and they were some of them were heavily tortured. And Sheikh Hasina justified her authoritarianism for 15 years under the name of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. And one of the core rhetoric of Sheikh Hasina's government was that she is the daughter of the father of the nation. And then, the human rights records under her government and the corruption, I don't want to repeat that, but those break any other record, at least in my lifetime, I've seen in Bangladeshi, in any Bangladeshi government, including Hussein Mohammad Ershad's government. So I would argue that is coming from fear, and I agree with you that there is a sense of there is a mob violence, and it has increased widely. There were mob attack on the minority, on the houses of the minority recently, Hindu minority. But I also want to underpin, because I wrote a foreign policy article in 2023 or 2024, and showing that this mob attack against the minorities has become a social trend, and that took place under Awami League regime several times as well. So it is a trend, a discouraging and deplorable trend that Bangladeshi society is seeing. I do not want to associate within a particular government, because in every other government time, we have seen minorities suffered, and that is a sad reality. I would also want to underpin that I think NCP is also using this sort of rhetoric, that equating Mujibism with fascism, to woo voters who are anti-Awami League and who are also critical of BNP or even Jamaat. But I do not know what are the numbers of there, but I would argue that there is a particular political project. They're hoping that they would be able to attract a certain number of young people. The law and order situation and the mob violence are also tied with the absence of political authority. I have friends who run small business and big businesses in Bangladesh, and many of them said to me that under Awami League regime, there was a chain of authority. They had to pay extra money, which we call extortion, to the party cadres, and they would make sure that their businesses will not be disturbed. But now it's kind of chaos for them, and they do not know who to pay, and the police doesn't act strongly, because if anyone from any political party, including BNP or NCP, is involved, they are afraid that they may lose their job, which shows the hangover of politicization of police under Hasina. And now they're afraid that if they go after the new political parties or the parties that may form government, which is BNP in future, they may lose their job. So I agree with you that there was a sense of chaotic situation, but also there is a lot of sense of encouragement in the country because people can speak freely now, which was not a phenomena under Hasina's regime for 15 years. And I do not see NCP is becoming a party that is able to form government at the moment. I do not think they have that sort of organizational setup, but there is if there is a possibility that they make an alliance with PNP, then they may get some seats. And there are also a lot of interest from Jamaat to form alliance with them. But I do not think NCP is interested to form alliance with Jamaat just because that would look bad for their image internationally. So I would argue that I think NCP's best chance is to form a government or even become a formidable political force will start after the next government will form. And they could play an effective role of an opposition or a force that criticize constructively the next government, and that's how they could woo the public and bring public in favor of them.
Yeah, if I can take from where Mubashar left, I completely agree, because in any kind of democracy, you actually need opposition, because all the while we have been discussing who will come to power. I think that is not significant. If NCP can be an effective opposition, that would be uh, really significant for country's democratic progress. But the NCP, some of the time also, though they have taken few, they have made few controversial statements against Bangladesh army, for which the ISPR has come to the defense of the armed forces. It's not very clear actually what exactly they want. I'm not very clear about their ideological, moorings, in the sense where do they stand. The post-Mujibism, I can agree with that, because half of them, as Mubashir said, also were, Chhatralik people. But then again, many of the people, really one does not know why one was part of the Chhatra League, or whether the person has left the Chhatra League voluntarily, or whether it is also a kind of strategy that they have adopted to survive in the situation. I'm not speaking of the top leaders, but that could be one of the thing. The more you keep on reading people revealing, I was this, but I joined this for this reason. So I really do not know. Maybe in the future this kind of thing comes up. But only thing is that unlike the Juvadal or the Chhatradal, the collecting protection money is not in NCP's hands. So I really do not know how they're going to fund their own, the political party which they have formed. Because in any kind of election, you really require a kind of money to fight for the election. I don't know from where the NCP will get that kind of money. Other political parties have, but NCP does not have. So the second is that they appear to be still idealistic, not realistic. Sometimes from some of the statement, I feel they still think that it is July 2024. No, the everything has transformed. Though I actually, I was a little frustrated when last year I was in Dhaka, not to see many women on the street. I put up this question to one of the senior editor of a leading national newspaper of Bangladesh. They said that, no, it is not the case. I said, I have always traveled in Dhaka by foot. Many places I have just walked down. It's very safe for the women if you're staying in the Dhaka University site. I'm speaking because that is the place I lived, and you just can walk down. Nothing you feel afraid of. But I myself was a little this thing. So people said that, there has been this absence of political authority, as Mubashar was defining that, and no police action even if the police is on the street. So the police does not want to get into without knowing which political party or who is the cadre against whom they are doing anything. So the NCP holds a lot of promise, but they have not come up with any kind of coherent. Yesterday they came up with a kind of statement and all, I think 10-point statement or something like that. But I till now, I feel that politics is a lot of chaotic, which is Gopalganj, to test the support base of the Awami League. I think it is better to organize there are 64 districts of Bangladesh. So it is better to organize at the grassroots level in other districts before you make a march to Gopalganj with the complete intention of confronting. That actually, brought a lot of this bloodshed. Second is that I also find the NCP slightly mature. I don't know whether I should use this terminology because they're obviously very, very new to the politics. They appear to be in a real hurry at the moment. They still have two members part of the government. So many people have started framing them as King's Party, which can play a significant role post-election. Suppose the BNP does not muster the two-third majority which is required for many of the legislation they would like to bring. So therefore, in that context, I will also like to add, it is not about the NCP, the number they are going to get in the next election. The BNP is equally wary of the kind of number they are going to get in the next election. Whether they should get, they are going to get absolute majority in the parliament. It appears to me that they are also equally not very, very sure. So the NCP holds promise, but it doesn't have the kind of base which the PNP of even the Jamaat has in the rural areas of Bangladesh. Some of the NCP leaders' lifestyle also have been questioned. One of the advisor, Asif Mahmood, he was caught with I think, AK-47 in the airport. This actually does not send a very good signal about a political party which is supposed to bring reforms, supposed to do away with what the Awami League did. I think if, though I don't believe in this opinion poll, but the little bit space which the Awami League has got, suppose, if not 18% as one of the opinion polls said, let us say 2%, that 2% space they have got compared to the last year because of nothing has changed in Bangladesh. The same corruption, the same kind of, the intensity is definitely less, but the corruption, the political, you are in a political authority, so you don't give a damn. You have five cars following you, misuse of the, especially the official vehicles and all, has already been reported in various newspapers. So, as far as the freedom of speech is concerned, it has always been with the people who are ruling the country and people who are supporting. Why I am saying this? Because some of the people, when you speak to them, they don't want to speak to you because they say, no, we don't want to, especially the army. So currently, I don't think the freedom of speech Army League has. The journalists, especially the Ekuise and others, have already been arrested. They have not been tried. Many of the people have been arrested. So some of the time I feel, what exactly has changed in this? Are we moving towards better? But I pin a lot of hope in the next election. So that being the political transformation.
I think what Shruti said about Gopalganj is really important here. What we saw that there was a clash between police and Awami League supporters there, and at least 4 Awami Leaguers were killed. And what happened after that is that police have arbitrarily detained hundreds of alleged Awami League supporters and filed 10 murder cases against over 8,400 unnamed people. And that reminds me that it was the similar way police operated against BNP and Jamaat under Awami League regime. So it shows that, that institutional reform of security apparatus is fundamental than any other reform in Bangladesh. So that is one point that I wanted to add to Shruti with reference to Gopalganj. And second, I acknowledge Shruti's point about what has changed. I was looking at the data today, and the Press Freedom Index of Reporters Without Borders, and I was curious to see what happened to Bangladesh's ranking in the past 12 months. So what is interesting is that from 2020 to 2024, Bangladesh's position in the press freedom index was between 152 to 164. Last in 2023, Bangladesh was 164, which means the press freedom situation of Bangladesh was closer to Putin's Russia. But in the past 12 months, according to the same index, Bangladesh is now at 149, which underpins that there are a lot of challenges ahead of Bangladesh, but there are slight improvements also happened. But I completely agree with Shruti, is that many journalists are now behind the bar who are perceived to be supporters of Army League, or even, when Sheikh Hasina was putting her state forces on the streets during July, August, they went to Sheikh Hasina and publicly said what she did is good. But many of these journalists are framed as or charged in murder cases, which is ridiculous. And those arbitrary arrest and imprisonment and false murder charges against the journalist who may have supported Army League but didn't participate in murder should be withdrawn.
So, having covered the political situation, I think, quite thoroughly in Bangladesh right now, I'd like to move on to maybe the more external aspects of Bangladesh's trajectory, and that's on its economic transition as well as its foreign policy. But starting with the economy, and I think it has to be acknowledged that despite her authoritarian governance, Sheikh Hasina's tenure did coincide with a significant amount of economic growth for Bangladesh. It exceeded India in terms of per capita income during that time. And now, amidst this very uncertain political transformation, Bangladesh is also facing global economic uncertainty, including new trade challenges that threaten its export-oriented economic model. So maybe, Jyoti, how do you assess Bangladesh's economic prospects during this period of political change? And are the current economic difficulties a temporary structural adjustment, or is it indicative of perhaps longer-term developmental challenges that we might see in the coming years?
Thanks, Tush. That's a very if we look back at the Hasina regime, their economic record up until COVID, you are correct that they did preside over impressive growth and development. Although it also has to be said that the growth and development story precedes them by several decades. It started probably in the late 80s, early 90s. Sort of with the garments factories, the ready-made garment sector, remittances, and so on, and also significant female participation in labor force, which is actually highest in the subcontinent. In terms of, and that has flow-on effects on development, because when women in the family work or have their own income, then that has social implications as well as just pure monetary implications. So all of these things are true, but also in the last few years of Hasina regime, there were significant strain on the economy, and that had a lot to do with the political economy. That had a lot to do with the oligarchs that were propping up the Hasina regime. Towards the very end, in 2022, 2023, what was happening was that a significant amount of money, billions of dollars, were taken out of the banking sector and siphoned off by Hasina oligarchs. And that had led to the taka depreciating by something about like 40%, 50% over a couple of years. And this puts Bangladesh closer to Sri Lanka or Pakistan in terms of depreciation. Over the same amount of period, or same period, Indian rupee probably had depreciated by 10%. And the stock of foreign reserves had halved in that period, and inflation was very high. So one could also argue that these economic strains, difficulties, actually also explain the sheer intensity of protests last July. So when the interim government came in, these were the imminent challenges that they faced. That there was a banking sector that was near collapse, and the stock of foreign reserves are depleting very quickly. Prices were high, okay, and or that is inflation was high, and the interim government has actually been able to tackle all of them. Taka has, in fact, started appreciating in recent weeks. So something that has not been seen in Bangladesh, I think, ever, or definitely not in last several decades. So that is one thing. Um, Exports actually have performed fairly well as well, because there was a and this is notwithstanding the tariff impact, right? Remittances have flown in very strongly, and that has also supported the economy. So in the near term, interim government, one could argue, has, against significant difficulties, have been able to stabilize things. Where things are looking very tricky at the moment is on private investment. And this is related to political uncertainty. This is related to law and order. Mubashar talked about this in terms of, sort of small or large businesses having to navigate a very, tricky scenarios. So basically, everybody has put their investment on hold. The upside, or one potential upside scenario, is that if the election goes smoothly and there is an elected government that can at least stabilize the law and order situation, then next year in 2026, we may see significant investment, private investment. I'm not talking about foreign investment. I'm just talking about normal businesses in Bangladesh, small or large. Just the people have just not spent anything in the last 12 months, and you need to replenish your factory. You need to buy new things just to run your business, right? So there is a lot of pent up investment demand that could flow into the market next year, and so that's the upside scenario. On the other hand, in the medium term, there is a significant worry, which is in terms of jobs. Um, if we look back to what happened last July, just the beginning of the uprising, it wasn't about Hasina regime, or it wasn't about human rights, or it wasn't about democracy, or any of those things. All of those things are true, but the initial demands were all couched around jobs. And what happened was that over the last 10-15 years, there has been a significant increase in the number of graduate, so student, young people who have obtained a university degree. Except most of these degrees were actually from the university system had been completely hollowed out under the Hasina regime, and most of these degrees were basically just as papers without producing any skills. And a lot of these young people, through no fault of their own, um, have very little employment opportunity, but they have the aspiration. So they had seen that their parents, or sort of older generation, getting a university degree is a ticket to a better life. You get a government job, or you get a private sector corporate job, good income, and so on. The young people today do not have that opportunity, because they were, the education system had hollowed out under Hasina, and that problem is still there. So you have lots of young people who have the aspirations of a better life. They are aware of what that better life looks like through social media and so on. If they don't have the opportunity to meet that aspiration, then that's a combustible pig. So whoever comes to power next, whilst next year immediately there might be that kind of pent up investment demand in the near term, and that could make things look good, in the longer term, the economy needs to create millions of jobs, and that remains to be seen how that happens, how that plays out.
Yeah, and I think lastly, I want to come to the foreign policy question. And I'd like to ask the two parts to this question because we're seeing some interesting shifts in both Bangladesh's regional foreign policy as well as the wider global situation. So there are two axes to this that I want to discuss. One of them is the regional policy with India and Pakistan. We're seeing Bangladesh have warmer relations with Pakistan, as evidenced by military delegations and increased cooperations. While tensions with its former regional ally India don't seem to have been resolved. And on a wider scale, we're seeing this sort of increased US-China competition on a global scale, combined with, let's say, unpredictable shifts in the American foreign policy under Donald Trump. So, on those two axes, India and Pakistan on the regional level and the broader US-China, let's say, realignment of global politics at a global level, what does Bangladesh's foreign policy look like in the future? What sort of partnerships is it looking for in the long run? And what are the implications for Bangladesh's strategic autonomy and economic interests?
I think I don't, in terms of the shift, yes, it appears to be a shift in Bangladesh's policy under the current regime, but the fundamental of the foreign policy remains friendship towards all, malice towards none. In fact, in the regional policy, Bangladesh's approach to India has changed after the fall of the government because some of the people who are in the government held India responsible for Hasina's continuation in power. And second is that the fact that, the flood and a lot of this um, propaganda kind of thing happen on both the sides. You see off and on lot of statement being given as matter of clarification by both the government. Actually, it does not tell you that everything is fine between the two governments, and they are also victim of the propaganda. And second thing is that on two of the issues which actually raised concern in India regarding its Pakistan policy. Not per se India is opposed to Bangladesh having any kind of relationship with Pakistan, because after all, its other neighbors like Nepal, Sri Lanka, Maldives and all, they have good relationship with Pakistan. So therefore, that was actually not the issue. I think one of the two of the uh, steps taken by the government. One is that without any check, the cargoes being uploaded from Karachi port landed up both in Chittagong and Mongla. So obviously it will raise concerns in India given the fact of the 10 truckload of arms not very long ago which landed in the Chittagong jetty. So in a sense, what actually is coming from there to here, which does not require any kind of checking. That is number one. Number two is the people from Pakistan who are coming to Bangladesh. We saw that they are also without any kind of security check. And mind you, the eastern border was also used by Masood Azhar at one point of time to gain entry to India. So India suddenly became very, very concerned about that. Why, this unchecked, without any security checking, Bangladesh is allowing the Pakistanis to come in, and the India-Pakistan dynamics and everything. So that raised concern. Third is that we also saw a visible outreach of Bangladesh, visible effort by the Bangladesh government to reach out to Pakistan. And the same kind of effort was not done in the context of India. Even if it was done in few cases, it was not considered adequate given that, the relationship deteriorated between the two countries. It is still, I won't say that everything is lost as far as India is concerned or as far as Bangladesh is concerned. There are institutional relationship between the two countries. Though the border has have stopped almost after COVID, it has not restarted. There are tension in the border for many of the issues that has been happening since the fall of the government. So all this actually is playing into this thing. The dynamics no more remains issues between India and Bangladesh. It also remains more of a issue between Pakistan being a factor in the India-Bangladesh relationship. So that I would say also is equally very, very significant. Third is that India is still like many of the others in Bangladesh. So obviously there is a transition. Is it a transition government? Is it the government with whom India needs to deal with? Though some of the companies who were in India post fall of Hasina because of security reasons, many of them were evacuated by India itself, and some of them also were left, especially the project engineers and all who were working on various uh, railway projects, bridges and all. So that has almost come to a standstill. But still, two of the visa has become very, very restricted. One of the only way to have a people-to-people connectivity, I feel, is, the general public who come and visit India. That actually has stopped, especially the tourism visa. The only two visas which are allowed is the student visa and the medical visa. But recently, I think India is also trying to reach out to the Bangladesh government after the terrible accident of the army helicopter, sending doctors and specialists, which did not find space in the Bangladeshi media, but I confirmed it from the government that yes, India has sent. But so therefore, I think we need to probably put more. There has to be a conscious effort to put the positive news. I think the most stumbling block present appears to be Hasina's presence here, her political activities, though almost it has stopped. But today I saw there was a statement, today or yesterday, there was a statement which was released from London by Sheikh Hasina. So this actually probably makes both Inus and the student leaders also very, very angry. So somewhere I think the two countries have to find middle ground. It is not about the leaders, it is about the countries. So therefore, in long term, given the geography, the two countries need to have a relationship. If the security of India is today affected, because this is something I keep on hearing from the security forces here, then that will also have an impact on Bangladesh, because Mubashar was speaking about the radicalism. Radicalism are the most networked people in the entire South Asia, radicals. So they will find their way, and their especially objectives is not limited to a particular country. It has a larger objective. So in that, it does not matter whether it's India or Bangladesh. It is for a particular ideology they have been fighting. So I think the two countries are, I would say, it's a kind of conjoined twins, but also at the same time, we are trying to figure each other out separately, but also trying to stay together. So I think in essence, life, this is fine. I don't take it seriously.
So I think the foreign policy question is interesting, and I agree with Shruti that there is a bit of cold shoulder between Bangladesh and India at the moment. Then, and that enable Bangladesh to to reach out to, or at least be warmer towards Pakistan. During Sheikh Hasina's regime, Bangladesh's foreign policy towards Pakistan was, in fact, it could be interpreted as an extension of Indian foreign policy to Pakistan. The another interesting development is the continuation of Bangladesh's China policy, which was taken under Sheikh Hasina's period. China had invested probably much more than India in Sheikh Hasina's authoritarianism, but they didn't speak much, unlike Indian government, and even some of the reference that was given from India related to the father of the nation and in the history of 1971. And I do understand India played a big role there, but I always find it super interesting because China is now accepted in all around. To NCP, to JAMA, even JAMA and BNP as well. So I would say that Bangladesh's foreign policy would continue towards China, and for export market, America is an important ally, and we did see that Bangladesh had secured, a good deal under the circumstances under Trump's tariff regime. And that underpins that there is a close working relationship between the US and Bangladesh. I would see that Bangladesh should remain, as Shruti said, friends to everyone, allies to none, even though the great powers will try to nudge Bangladesh to take a side, but I don't think Bangladesh could afford to take any side. That's my summary of Bangladesh's foreign policy.
So if I could quickly come in and add just something to what Shruti and Mubashar said, which is that fortunately or otherwise, except during extraordinary situations, circumstances, and I will come back to that, the major global powers and regional powers usually had one objective in Bangladesh that was in common. So this is US, China, Europeans and Indians, and as well as Pakistan or Turkey or other players. Basically, no one wants to see a country of 170 million people, 90% Muslim, potential economic development as well as risks, right? No one wants a country like that to become unstable. Okay, this is exactly why back in the 80s and 90s there had been significant development aid from the West, from Japan, because no one wanted a repeat of the 70s style famine and social disruption. This is also why there was in the 90s and afterwards there were support for democratic transition. But at the same time, this is also the same instability, the fear of instability. This is what Hasina regime, Sheikh Hasina used very well to sell her regime to all international players. All right. So it's not so obviously India was her biggest backer. There is no no way to sweeten that. That's a plain truth, but not the only backer, right? Western powers, Western democracies, or China, they had also been okay with her because she had promised everybody that look, either me or instability, and you don't want instability. I suspect the same equation will hold after the election, and all the powers, as Mubashar said, they would try to nudge Bangladesh towards them, but at the same time, they would not. I suspect they would not push it so much that the newly elected government tips over. Right, so everyone would try to nudge them, but not push them, because at the end, there is that confluence of interests across the board about stability. Of course, there is one big wrinkle. I agree with Shruti and Mubashar that relationship with India will stabilize, except one issue is that Sheikh Hasina remains in India, and that remains a potential political flashpoint for any new opposition to bait the new government. That hey, you guys are too soft on India. You cannot bring her back. Sort of, and so on. This is this is highly emotionally charged thing that Sheikh Hasina is being tried. Going back to the question one that you asked, Tushar, that Shruti and Mubashar so eloquently answered. Sheikh Hasina is being tried. There are all this evidence that she ordered killings herself. She remains in India. The new government does not get her back, and there isn't really any way of getting her back. That remains a potential flashpoint that needs to be managed.
So fascinating insights on Bangladesh's domestic political situation, as well as the outlook for its economic and foreign policy prospects. But yes, we will have to see when the elections are announced and how the situation develops past then. But until then, thank you so much to our panelists for giving us a fascinating insight into what's happening in Bangladesh right now. So thank you all.